The alarm didn't sound like fear. It sounded like grief. Captain Elena Voss had heard every warning klaxon the Meridian owned. Hull stress, radiation spikes, hostile contact. But this one was different. Low, mournful. As if the ship itself understood something the crew didn't yet. "Report," she said, gripping the edge of the command chair. "Sensors are clean, Captain." Lieutenant Marcus Osei's hands moved fast over the console, sweat already beating at his temple. "No threats, no damage. The alarm's coming from the nav array. It's reacting to something outside the hull." "Reacting to what?" Nobody answered. On the main screen, a thin white line stretched across the starfield, cutting through 3 star systems in a path too straight, too deliberate, to be anything natural. It didn't curve with gravity. It didn't bend around a single star. It simply existed, ruler straight, as if someone had drawn a border across the galaxy itself and dared the universe to argue. "That," Elena said quietly, "is not on any chart." Beside her Threll, the Meridian's Concord liaison, an ancient Karsu diplomat with skin like cracked stone and eyes that had watched 3 centuries of politics, went very still. Stillness, for a Karsu, was worse than screaming. "Captain Voss." His translator crackled slightly, betraying the tension underneath. "I recommend we alter course. Immediately." "Why? What is that thing?" "It is called, in old Concord record, the Omega Line." Threll's 4 fingers curled against the armrest. "It should not be visible from here. It should not be visible at all." Elena had learned over 3 years of working with the Concord that alien caution usually meant there's a regulation for this. She'd also learned that regulations from species 10,000 years older than humanity were rarely written out of politeness. "Give me a reason, Threll. A real one." The Karsu hesitated, and hesitation, from him, was its own kind of answer. "There is a treaty clause," he finally said. "Older than the Concord's founding charter. No vessel shall cross the Omega Line, no exceptions, no appeals." "That's not a reason. That's a rule. For most species," Threll said, "that is enough." Elena almost smiled. Almost. Because that sentence, "for most species," was the exact reason the Concord had spent 50 years watching humanity with a mixture of admiration and low-grade panic. Humans didn't do well with rules that had no explanation attached. "Naomi," Elena said instead, turning to the science station. "Talk to me." "Doctor." Naomi Chen didn't look up from her console, chestnut hair falling loose from its clip, fingers flying across star charts that kept refreshing with contradictory data. "The line isn't a physical structure, no mass, no gravity signature. It's something else. A field boundary, maybe. And Captain..." She paused, frowning at her screen. "Every Concord database entry that even mentions this region has been redacted. Not classified, redacted. Someone went in after the fact and erased it. Someone erased galactic star charts. Multiple someones. Multiple eras. This wasn't a one-time cover-up. It's been maintained. For a long time." Elena felt the old, familiar itch at the back of her skull. The one that had gotten her in trouble with 3 separate commanding officers, and if she was honest with herself, the same itch that had swallowed her father whole 11 years ago. Captain Daniel Voss, xenoarchaeologist, explorer. The man who had kissed his daughter goodbye before a classified survey mission and never come home. The Concord had offered exactly 2 words of explanation. Mission failure. No wreckage. No remains. No further comment, ever, no matter how many times 17-year-old Elena had begged for one. She looked at the white line on the screen and felt something cold settle in her chest. This is close to where he disappeared. "Captain," Threll said again, softer now, almost pleading. "I am asking you, as someone who respects your species, do not do what I think you are considering." "I haven't considered anything yet." "You have. I have worked with humans long enough to recognize the look. It is the same look your species had when you first reached out to alien contact protocols we insisted you follow, and instead you simply said hello. Marcus laughed, short and surprised, and even Naomi's mouth twitched. Elena didn't laugh. She was looking past the line, at the black space beyond it, where the redacted chart simply stopped, a hole in galactic knowledge shaped exactly like a door someone didn't want opened. Set a course, she said. Slow approach. Non-hostile posture. We're not crossing anything yet. We're just looking. Captain. Threll, I'm not asking the Concord's permission. I'm informing you, as a courtesy, what my ship is about to do. The Karsu's stone-colored face did something complicated, somewhere between fear and unmistakably a flicker of respect. Understood, he said at last. For the record, I object. Noted. The Meridian turned, engines humming low, and began its approach toward the line. At first nothing happened. The stars ahead looked ordinary, a little sparse maybe. The systems here older and dimmer than the core worlds, but nothing that screamed ancient forbidden border. Elena almost let herself relax, then Naomi's console screamed. Captain, everyone in the alien crew sections, their vitals just spiked. Heart rate, cortisol, everything. Threll made a sound Elena had never heard a Karsu make before. A low, guttural moan, 4 fingers pressed against his skull as though trying to keep something inside it from escaping. Threll! They remember, he gasped. We don't know what it is, but the body remembers. Across the ship, comm channels lit up with panic. The 2 Vashtu engineers in the lower decks screaming in a language the translators couldn't parse fast enough. A Farai security officer collapsed at his post, seizing, eyes rolled back, white. Every non-human aboard the Meridian, all at once in perfect synchrony, breaking down. Every human aboard felt nothing but a low, distant hum, like standing too close to a power line. Instruments are failing, Marcus called out, voice climbing. Navigation comms, half the sensor array, and it's not damage, it's like something's reaching in and turning things off. Pull us back, Elena snapped. Now. Too late. A beacon buried somewhere in that empty, redacted stretch of space, dormant for longer than any civilization currently alive could measure, woke up. It didn't broadcast on any frequency the Meridian systems recognized. It simply arrived inside every speaker, every headset, every dying screen on the ship, in a voice that sounded like it had been carved out of stone and grief in equal measure. Ancient, patient, utterly certain. Threll, still shaking on the deck, translated the words a heartbeat before the ship's own systems did, his voice barely a whisper. Turn back. You are not the first. Elena stared at the white line on the view screen, her father's face flashing unbidden behind her eyes, and understood, with absolute bone-deep certainty, that the Meridian had just knocked on a door that 10,000 years of galactic history had spent every possible resource trying to keep shut. And something on the other side had finally answered. 6 Concord warships dropped out of faster-than-light formation around the Meridian before Elena had even finished pulling her crew back from the line, and every one of them had weapons hot. They're hailing us, Naomi said, voice tight. Aggressively. Put it through. The face that filled the screen belonged to Admiral Kalis Rowe, a Threndari, tall and silver-scaled, with the kind of stare that had ended 3 border disputes without a single shot fired. He did not look like a man who had come to talk. Captain Voss. His translator rendered his tone as flat, controlled fury. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Admiral, with respect, we haven't crossed anything. We're still 50,000 kilometers from the line. 50,000 kilometers is 50,000 too close. Rowe's eyes flicked to something off screen, a report maybe on the condition of Elena's non-human crew. I have 3 Vashtu, 1 Farai, and your ship's liaison currently listed as medical emergencies. Do you understand what you triggered, Captain? Or are humans simply incapable of caring? Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. I understand that something down there just spoke to us in a 10,000-year-old voice and told us we weren't the first to come looking. I'd like to understand what that means before anyone starts shooting. You will understand nothing, Rowe snapped, because there is nothing to understand. There is only the line and the rule, which has kept this galaxy stable since before your species learned to make fire. Then why? Elena said quietly. Did every alien species on my ship just collapse, and every human on it stayed standing? That landed. She watched it land, the tiny flicker in Ro's silver eyes, gone almost before it appeared. He didn't answer. 20 minutes later, Elena stood in the Meridian's small conference room across from Threll, who was recovering under a thin medical blanket, his stone-colored skin gone the color of ash. Admiral Ro had come aboard personally, apparently unwilling to trust this conversation to a screen. "Explain it to me," Elena said. "All of it. Not conquered talking points. The truth." Ro studied her for a long moment, then looked at Threll, who gave the smallest of nods, an old friend granting permission to a younger species to finally be told something true. "Before the conquered," Ro began, "before any of the founding species had even left their home systems, there was another civilization, older than all of us combined. We call them the Vilethi, though that is not truly their name. We lost their true name a long time ago, along with almost everything else about them." "Lost how?" "They vanished," Ro said. "At the line, all of them. Every colony, every fleet, every recorded voice, gone in what our oldest histories describe as a single generation. The species that came after them, the ones who first built what became the Concord, found only the line itself, and enough fragments of Vilethi record to understand one thing clearly." He paused, and for the first time, Elena saw something in the Admiral's composed face that looked almost like an old wound. "Do not follow them." "That's it? A warning with no explanation?" "An explanation was attempted," Ro said, "multiple times across multiple eras by multiple species who believed themselves too advanced, too careful, too different to suffer the same fate. None returned. Eventually, the Concord itself was partly built around a single shared purpose. Not trade, not peace, though those came too. Enforcement. A promise, sworn by every founding species, that the line would never be crossed again." Elena sat back, the pieces sliding into a shape she didn't like. "You built a civilization around a fear you can't even explain." "We built a civilization around survival," Rose said sharply, "which your species 4 decades into galactic contact has not yet earned the right to question." "Admiral." Threll's voice, weak but steady, cut through the tension. "With respect, she is not entirely wrong. Fear without understanding is still fear. It does not become wisdom simply because it is old." Ro turned on him, something almost betrayed in his expression, but Threll held his gaze without flinching, and after a moment the Admiral looked away first. "There is something else," Threll continued, quieter now, "something the Concord does not advertise even to its own citizens. Every species tested near the line, everyone, across 10,000 years, has shown the same reaction my crewmates showed today. A kind of inherited terror. Not learned, not taught. Something closer to instinct, buried so deep it activates before the conscious mind even understands why. Except humans," Elena said slowly. "Except humans," Threll agreed. "You are the first species in recorded conquered history to approach the line and feel nothing but curiosity." Silence settled over the room. Elena watched Ro's face carefully and understood for the first time that this wasn't just a briefing. It was a test. One the Admiral clearly hadn't wanted to conduct, and one whose result unsettled him more than he was willing to say aloud. "That's why you're really here," she said. "Not to punish us. To study us." Ro didn't deny it. "The Meridian is to be placed under Concord quarantine," he said instead, standing. "Your ship will be escorted back to the nearest station. Your crew will be debriefed extensively, and Captain Voss, you personally will answer for this incursion before the Concord Council. And if I refuse, then you will discover exactly how much patience 10,000 years of fear has left us." He turned to leave, and stopped, because every alarm on the Meridian began screaming at once. a different pitch than before. Not the mournful, ancient tone from earlier. This was sharper, immediate, a proximity alert. Report! Elena was moving before she finished the word, back onto the bridge, Roe and Threll close behind her. Marcus was already at his station, face pale in the glow of the screen. Contacts. Multiple contacts emerging directly from the line. They're not Concord registered, not any hull design in our database, not Velithi rec patterns, nothing. They're just coming through. On the main screen, 5 vessels shimmered into visibility. Sleek, ancient-looking, hulls etched with patterns that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves at the edge of perception. They moved with a grace no Concord shipyard had ever produced, and they were heading directly toward the human and Concord fleet. That is not possible, Roe said, and for the first time since he'd come aboard, his voice actually shook. Nothing has crossed the line in either direction in 10,000 years. One of the vessels broke from formation and drifted closer to the meridian, close enough that its hull markings resolved into something almost readable, symbols that made Naomi go rigid at her console, her hands frozen above the keys. Then a channel opened. Not through any protocol the Meridian systems recognized, the message simply appeared, routed directly into Elena's private command feed, bypassing every layer of security the ship possessed. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was 2 lines of text and a set of coordinates deep inside the redacted region beyond the line. Daniel Voss. He is waiting. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The bridge around her seemed to tilt, sound falling away until all she could hear was her own pulse hammering in her ears. Her father's name, spoken, no, sent, by something that had just crossed a border nothing was supposed to cross for the first time in 10,000 years. She looked up, meeting Threll's horrified stare, then Roe's stunned silence, and knew with absolute certainty that whatever answer she gave next would decide far more than her own fate. "Captain," Marcus said carefully, watching her face. "What do we do?" Elena stared at the coordinates glowing on her screen, at the door into forbidden space that had just, impossibly, opened wide, and felt 11 years of unanswered grief rise up to meet it. "We go and find out who's waiting," she said. Admiral Roe's voice was still shouting through the comm system when Elena cut the channel and gave the order that would end her career, if she lived long enough to have it ended. "Marcus, plot a course to those coordinates. Naomi, I want everything you can pull from that transmission before we jump. Threll," she hesitated, looking at the Karsu still pale and shaking from the line's effect on him. "You don't have to come. You are about to cross the one boundary my entire civilization has spent 10,000 years fearing," Threll said, pulling himself upright with visible effort. "I am not missing this." The Meridian broke formation and ran. 2 Concord cruisers gave chase for the first 11 minutes, weapons charged but never firing. Elena suspected Roe couldn't bring himself to order an attack on a ship heading toward the one mystery his entire species had spent millennia avoiding. By the time the Meridian crossed the white line on the star charts, the pursuit had fallen silent, watching from a careful, respectful distance, unwilling to follow. Nothing happened when they crossed. No alarm, no ancient voice, no collapse, just stars. Ordinary, unremarkable stars, scattered across a stretch of space that looked, for all the terror surrounding it, exactly like every other patch of galaxy Elena had ever charted. "That's it?" Marcus said, half a laugh escaping despite himself. 10,000 years of nightmares and it's just space? "Don't relax yet," Naomi murmured, eyes fixed on her console. "Something's out here. I'm reading structure. Artificial, low power, but massive. About 2 hours out, right on top of the coordinates." The structure, when they reached it, took Elena's breath away. It hung in the dark like a broken rib cage. A station easily 10 kilometers across, built in overlapping rings of dark, corroded metal, half its surface scarred by what looked like ancient battle damage, the rest simply eaten away by time. But threaded through the ruin unmistakably were newer sections. Human sections. reinforced hull plating in a style the fleet had phased out 15 years ago. A docking collar with English lettering, faded but legible. Voss Expedition, restricted access. Elena's hands were shaking on the console rail. That's my father's ship registry code. Captain, Marcus said gently, are you sure you want to go in? I've been sure for 11 years. They took a shuttle across, Elena, Marcus, and Naomi in envirosuits, Threll monitoring from the Meridian. His physiology, still recovering, couldn't risk another exposure to whatever lingering effect the region carried. The airlock cycled open onto a corridor lit by the dim, red glow of emergency power that had somehow, impossibly, been running for over a decade. The station was a graveyard of paper notes, data drives, and hand-scrawled equations covering entire walls where the automated systems had apparently failed. Elena recognized her father's handwriting before she recognized anything else. That same impatient slant, dashing across a wall of star charts and translated fragments of a language none of them knew. He was here, she whispered. He was alive here. For how long? Naomi asked, carefully photographing every surface as they moved deeper. This equipment, some of it's advanced even by fleet current standards. He wasn't just surviving out here. He was building something. They found the central archive 2 decks down, a room untouched by decay, humming with quiet, persistent power. At its center sat a data terminal, and beside it a leather-bound journal that made Elena's throat close the moment she saw it. The same journal her father had carried on every mission since she was a little girl. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The early entries were familiar: mission logs, technical notes, the occasional line about missing her and her mother. Then, dated 11 years and 2 months ago, the tone changed entirely. We found it. The line isn't a border, it's a seal, something the Valithi built at the cost of their entire civilization, and it's failing. I don't have time to explain everything, so I'll write what matters. The Concord didn't lie to protect a rule. They lied because the truth is worse than any rule could be. Elena flipped forward, scanning entries filled with increasingly frantic diagrams, translated fragments, desperate calculations. The Valithi weren't the first to find what's beyond the line either. They were the last ones strong enough to contain it. Every species that came after has been too afraid to even try understanding what they sacrificed everything to hold back. I have to stay. I can't explain it yet. I don't fully understand it myself. But leaving now would undo something that took them 10,000 years to build. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. If you're reading this, it means you found the same door I did. Please, be more careful than I was. The final entry was dated only weeks after the first. They didn't fail to cross the line. They succeeded. And that's why no one ever came back. Nothing followed. Pages and pages of the journal sat blank after that single, devastating line. Naomi was the first to break the silence, her voice hushed. Elena, I need you to see this. She'd pulled up a section of wall covered in her father's translation work, Valithi script, painstakingly decoded symbol by symbol over what must have been years, cross-referenced against fragments Elena recognized from the beacon's warning. At the center of the wall, circled in red ink so many times the marker had bled through the metal beneath it, was a single translated phrase. Not a wall, a cage, and the cage is breaking. Marcus, Elena said, her voice barely steady. How long has the station's power core been running? He checked his scanner and his face went white. Continuously. 11 years, 2 months, since your father's last entry. Whatever's keeping this place alive, it's not the original systems. Someone's been maintaining it. A low vibration rolled through the floor beneath their feet. Not an explosion, not an attack, but something deliberate. Deep in the station's structure, machinery that had been dormant for over a decade began, slowly, deliberately, to wake up. Lights that had been dead for years flickered on down the corridor beyond the archive, one after another, in a pattern too precise to be random. like a heartbeat gathering strength. Elena. Naomi's voice had dropped to a whisper, staring at her console. I'm reading a biometric signature. It just activated in the station's core systems. It's keying to a genetic match. A match to what? Naomi looked up, her expression caught somewhere between wonder and dread. To you. The vibration beneath them intensified, and far below, deep in the bones of the ancient ruined station, something enormous began, for the first time in 11 years, to move. The floor split open before anyone could react, and Elena's first instinct, the one that had kept her alive through 3 border skirmishes and 100 smaller disasters, was to grab Naomi and pull her back from the widening gap. But nothing attacked. No alarm, no weapon, no monster rising from the dark. Instead, a platform rose smoothly out of the depths, carrying a single object, a cylinder of dark, glass-like material, veined with faint threads of light that pulsed in slow rhythm, like something breathing. As it rose, the pulses quickened, reacting, unmistakably, to Elena's presence. It recognizes you, Naomi breathed, scanner trembling in her hands. Elena, this isn't random. Your father didn't just leave this running, he keyed it to you specifically, he knew you'd come. Or hoped I would, Elena said quietly, staring at the cylinder. Marcus, can you get a reading on what's inside? Marcus ran his scanner over the surface, frowning. Data, a lot of it, encoded in that same script from the walls. And Elena, there's a secondary signal underneath it. Weak, but steady. It's not a recording. What do you mean, not a recording? I mean, it's live. Elena reached out before she could stop herself, and the moment her palm touched the surface, the cylinder split open along invisible seams, releasing a soft breath of preserved air and a rush of light that resolved, impossibly, into a voice. Not her father's voice. Older. Layered, as though many throats spoke as one, in a language that shifted mid-sentence into something the translators could almost, but not quite, parse. Threll's voice crackled urgently over the comm from the Meridian. Captain, I'm reading that transmission from orbit. Elena, that pattern, I recognize it. It's Vailithi, authentic Vailithi, not a fragment, not a legend, a direct recording. Translate it, Elena said, throat tight. There was a pause, static, and then Threll's voice again, hushed with something close to awe. It says, we did not fail. We chose. The cage holds, but the cage is not eternal. One day someone must choose again. The recording ended. Silence pressed down over the archive. What cage? Marcus asked. What are they talking about? Naomi, still scanning the walls of translated notes, went suddenly rigid. Elena, I think I understand now. Not everything, but enough. The line was never meant to keep an enemy out. It's a containment field. The Vailithi didn't vanish fighting a war and losing. They vanished building this, sacrificing themselves generation after generation to seal something away that they couldn't destroy. Seal what? Elena demanded. Before Naomi could answer, the station shuddered violently. Not the slow wakening from before, but something sharper, more urgent. Every remaining light in the corridor flared red. Captain, Threll's voice cut in, tight with alarm. I am reading a massive fluctuation across the entire line, not just at your position. Across the entire boundary. It's weakening, rapidly. Weakening, how fast? At this rate, hours, Captain, not years, hours. Marcus swore under his breath, already moving toward the door. We need to get back to the ship. Wait. Elena grabbed the data cylinder, its light dimming now that its message had been delivered, and shoved it into her pack. If this is a containment field and it's failing, then whatever it's containing is about to get out, Naomi finished grimly. They ran. Back aboard the Meridian, Admiral Rowe's face filled the main screen the moment they cleared the airlock, his composure from before entirely gone. Behind him, Elena could see conquered bridge crew in barely controlled panic, alerts flashing red across every visible display. Voss, Rowe said, and for the first time, there was no anger in his voice. only something close to dread. Whatever you found out there, it's already affecting readings across half our monitored border. Every sensor buoy along the line is registering the same collapse pattern. I need to know what you know. Now. Elena laid it out fast, the journal, the recording, the phrase burned into her memory. Not a wall. A cage. And the cage is breaking. Rose's silver scale seemed to pale as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. There is a reason, he finally said, that the Concord's founding treaty was never fully explained even to our own historians. Some truths were considered too dangerous to preserve intact, even in secrecy. What little survives suggests the Vilethi didn't just build a wall. They built it around something that predates them, something even they could not kill, only contain at the cost of nearly their entire species. What is it? Elena asked. I don't know, Ro admitted, and the admission clearly cost him. No one alive does. Only that every species who has tried to learn more has either turned back in time or never returned to tell anyone what they found. Then we're the first to come back, Elena said. For now, Ro said grimly. Marcus, still scanning data from the station cylinder, made a strangled sound. Elena, you need to see this. He pulled up a translated fragment, not from the ancient recording but from her father's own notes dated just days before his final entry. The containment isn't passive. It requires active reinforcement, a resonance frequency matched to the original sealing ritual. The Vilethi maintained it for millennia through sheer numbers, generation after generation adding their strength to the field. There aren't enough of them left to sustain it anymore. There's almost no one left at all. I think that's why it chose to respond to us. Not because we're special, because we're here, and it's running out of time. Elena felt the weight of it settle into her chest, heavy and undeniable. Marcus, she said slowly, can human ships generate that kind of resonance? He ran calculations, jaw tightening as the numbers resolved. Theoretically, yes. Newer hull designs, our drive cores, they're built on principles closer to the original Vilethi tech than anything the Concord currently uses. We could reinforce a localized section of the field. Maybe by time. How much time? I don't know. And Elena... He hesitated, meeting her eyes. The process would put enormous strain on the crew generating it. I don't know if it's survivable long term. Ro, still watching from the screen, spoke quietly. Captain Voss, I have spent my entire career enforcing a rule I did not understand, built on a fear I inherited rather than earned. I am not proud to say that your species' recklessness may be the only thing standing between this galaxy and whatever the Vilethi gave everything to contain. If you have a plan, I will support it. Concord authorization or not. Elena looked at her crew, Marcus grim and ready, Naomi still pale but resolute, Threll watching from the screen with something that had shifted unmistakably from fear into trust. Then let's build a plan, she said. They had perhaps hours before the numbers ran out, and they still didn't know what exactly they'd be fighting to hold back. The answer came sooner than anyone wanted. Far across the weakening boundary, in a sector the Meridian sensors hadn't been monitoring, an automated Concord relay station went dark in a single instant. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply erased from every channel at once. Seconds later, a distress signal flared to life on a dozen frequencies simultaneously, garbled, frantic, and then abruptly silent. Naomi's voice, when she finally spoke, was barely audible. Something just crossed the line. The relay station's last transmission played only once before Elena ordered it deleted from the Meridian's public logs. Not because it was classified, but because no one who heard the sound the crew made in their final seconds needed to hear it twice. Confirmed contacts, Marcus said, voice clipped and fast, all business now, burying the fear where it couldn't slow his hands. Multiple signatures moving through the breach point. They're not ships. No propulsion signature, no hull mass reading. Elena, my sensors don't know what to call these things. On the tactical display, dark shapes bloomed across the weakened section of the line like ink spreading through water, spreading, dividing, multiplying, moving toward the nearest conquered picket ships with a speed that defied every known engine design. Admiral Rowe's voice cut through the comm, stripped of its usual command polish. All Concord vessels, converge on the breach point. Weapons free. I say again, weapons free. The first exchange lasted 90 seconds. Elena watched 3 Concord warships open fire on the encroaching shapes, watched energy weapons that could crack a moon's crust pass through them as though they were smoke, and watched, with rising horror, as the shapes didn't retaliate with weapons at all. They simply touched the ships, and the ships stopped answering hails. "They're not destroying them," Naomi said, staring at sensor telemetry with growing dread. "The hulls are intact, power's intact, the crews," she swallowed. "The crews are just gone, not dead. Gone. Like something scraped the ship clean." "Corrupted," Threll said quietly from the comm, and something in his ancient voice had gone hollow. "Not destroyed. Taken. This matches, Elena, this matches fragments of the oldest Velithi warnings, the ones the Concord always dismissed as myth. It does not kill. It consumes. Thought memory will. Everything that makes a mind a mind." Rowe's fleet began to fall back, but not fast enough. 2 more ships went dark, their running lights still glowing, achingly ordinary, drifting now as empty shells among the stars. "Elena." Marcus's voice snapped her back to the moment. "If we're doing this, we need to do it now. The resonance field, I can rig the Meridian's drive core to project it, but I'll need to be right at the source, manually tuning the frequency in real time. Automated systems can't adjust fast enough." "How close to the breach?" "Close enough that if this doesn't work, we won't get a second chance to try something else." Elena looked at him, steady, terrified, refusing to back down, and felt something in her chest tighten painfully. "Marcus." "Don't," he said, managing a thin, exhausted smile. "I already lost people to something the Concord wouldn't explain. I'm not running from the chance to actually understand what took them this time. Let me do this." There wasn't time to argue. The Meridian burned hard toward the breach point, alongside what remained of Rowe's shattered fleet, Marcus already down in the engine core, hands steady on controls that hummed with barely contained power. "Field's forming," he called up, voice tight with concentration. "Elena, it's working. The resonance is matching the original containment pattern. I can feel it stabilizing." For one impossible, beautiful moment, the spreading dark shapes slowed, faltered. The tide of consuming shadow pulled back from the widening breach as the field Marcus generated pressed against it. Ancient technology answering ancient technology across 10,000 years. Then the field stuttered. "It's too much," Marcus gritted out. "The core can't sustain the output. I need to boost it manually, bro." "Marcus, don't." "There's no time, Elena." Through the ship's internal cameras, Elena watched him reroute power directly through the manual override, bypassing every safety limiter the Meridian possessed, his whole body shaking under the strain as raw energy poured through systems never designed to carry it. The field strengthened. The breach impossibly began to close. And Marcus screamed, not in pain exactly, but as if something enormous were passing through him on its way to somewhere else, using him as a conduit between 2 forces neither of them fully understood. "Marcus!" Elena was already moving, sprinting for the engine core, Naomi close behind her. They found him collapsed against the console, breathing but barely conscious, the resonance field holding steady around them, humming with a strange, stable calm. The breach outside had sealed, not completely but enough. The dark shapes had stopped spreading. For now. "He's alive," Naomi said, checking his vitals with shaking hands. "Barely. Elena, he can't sustain this much longer. None of us can. This is a stopgap, not a solution." Threll's voice came through, hoarse with something close to grief and something close to wonder in equal measure. "Captain, I need to tell you something, and I fear the timing could not be worse." "Tell me." "The genetic key that activated your father's station. The resonance pattern Marcus just used, drawn from your father's own notes. Elena, none of this was random. Your father wasn't merely a researcher who stumbled onto Velithi technology by chance? Naomi, still monitoring the archive data streaming from the cylinder they'd recovered, went very still, reading something on her screen that made her face drain of color. Elena, she said carefully, the genetic signature the station keyed to, it wasn't just a match for you. It's a match for a specific bloodline the Velithi themselves flagged, over 10,000 years ago, in the earliest containment records. A line they predicted, somehow, would eventually be needed to complete the failsafe. That's not possible, Elena said. My father was human. My family's just... Elena. Naomi's voice cracked slightly. I don't think your father found this place by accident. I think it's been waiting for someone like him, like you, for 10,000 years. Before Elena could process the impossible weight of that sentence, a new signal lit up on the ship's long-range sensors. Faint, buried deep within the sealed section of the breach, easy to miss beneath the chaos of the last hour. A steady, rhythmic pulse. Alive. Human, coming from directly inside the line itself. That's not possible, Marcus rasped from the floor, forcing his eyes open despite Naomi's protests. Nothing's supposed to be able to survive in there. Someone is, Elena said, staring at the signal, her heart hammering against her ribs as 11 years of grief and unanswered questions collided all at once. She keyed the comm with trembling hands. This is Captain Elena Voss of the Meridian, hailing the signal source inside the breach. Please respond. Static. A long, agonizing pause, then a voice. Rough, weathered by more than a decade of isolation but unmistakably impossibly familiar, crackled through every speaker on the bridge. Elena, is that really you? Her breath left her in a single, broken sound. Dad? Elena crossed into the breach in a stripped-down shuttle with barely enough shielding to survive the crossing, and every second of the short, silent flight felt like 11 years compressed into minutes. Naomi had wanted to come. Ro had insisted on an escort. Elena had refused both gently but absolutely. Whatever waited on the other side of that signal belonged to her alone to face first. The shuttle broke through the last thinning edge of the containment field, and the view outside the canopy stopped making sense. Space, if it could still be called that, folded strangely here. Stars visible but wrong, distant and dim as though viewed through frosted glass. And at the center of it all, a structure of impossible scale. A lattice of dark energy and ancient metal, woven together like the ribs of something enormous and long dead, pulsing faintly with the same slow, patient rhythm she'd felt in her father's data cylinder. A single figure stood, or rather was fused, into the heart of the lattice, tethered by threads of light that ran from his body into the structure itself, feeding it, sustaining it, at a cost Elena could see written across every inch of him even from a distance. She docked with shaking hands and stepped into the strange, humming dark, and there he was, her father, older than his years should have allowed, his hair gone entirely white, half his body woven through with fine threads of the same dark, glass-like material from the cylinder. Not a wound, she understood slowly, but a kind of bonding, ancient technology grown into living flesh over 11 long years of holding a door shut with nothing but will. You shouldn't have come, Daniel Voss said, and his voice, though rough, still carried the same warmth she remembered from childhood. But I hoped you would. God help me, I hoped. Dad. Her voice broke entirely. What did you do to yourself? What needed doing? He managed a tired, aching smile. The Velithi built this seal to hold something they couldn't destroy, an intelligence, ancient beyond even their reckoning, that consumes thought itself, devours minds, memories, whole civilizations, given the chance. They sacrificed everything to lock it away. But locks need keepers, Elena, generation after generation of them, adding their strength, their will to hold the door shut. And you just decided to be one? Alone? I didn't decide alone. His eyes, still achingly familiar despite everything else that had changed, softened. The station chose me the way it's now chosen you, not randomly. There's a bloodline the Violithi flagged in their earliest records. People whose minds resonate naturally with the containment pattern. Rare. Precious. I don't fully understand why it's us, Elena. I only know that when I found this place dying, with no one left to hold it, I couldn't walk away and let it fail on my watch. So you gave up everything, me, Mom, your whole life. I gave up everything I could live without, he said gently, to protect everything I couldn't. Elena felt 11 years of grief and anger and love collide inside her chest all at once, and for a long moment neither of them spoke, the ancient lattice humming softly around them like a held breath. The field is failing, she finally said. Marcus barely stabilized it, and he can't sustain it much longer. Whatever's keeping you alive in here, it's not enough anymore. Is it? Her father's expression answered before he did. No, it's not. I've felt it weakening for months, I think. I think I always knew it would eventually need more than just me. Then tell me how to help you. Elena, Dad, I didn't cross an ancient forbidden border, watch half a conquered fleet get gutted, and lose 11 years of my life wondering if you were dead just to lose you again in the next 5 minutes. Tell me. Daniel Voss studied his daughter for a long, silent moment. The same stubborn set of the jaw he'd passed down to her without meaning to, the same refusal to accept an unacceptable answer. And something in his face broke open with a grief so old it had nearly become peace. The failsafe isn't destruction, he said finally. It never was. The Violithi didn't build a weapon. They built a bond, a permanent tether between a willing mind and the thing beyond the line, strong enough to hold it forever, at the cost of the keeper's freedom. One consciousness, anchoring an entire seal. That's what I've been doing here. That's what's failing now, because one person was never meant to hold this alone forever. It needs more. Then let me share it. Elena, no. His voice cracked, real fear breaking through 11 years of hardened resolve. You don't understand what you're asking. This isn't heroics, it's permanent. You'd be giving up your entire life, tethered to this place, to this thing, the same as me. I understand exactly what I'm asking, Elena said, and her voice, though trembling, didn't waver. I understand that every species in this galaxy has spent 10,000 years running from this moment because they were too afraid to make the choice you made alone. I understand that you didn't do this because you had no other option. You did it because you chose to, even knowing the cost, because the alternative was letting something unimaginable loose on people who'd never even know to be afraid of it. That doesn't mean you have to make the same choice. No, Elena agreed, stepping closer. Close enough now to see the exhaustion and love and terror warring in her father's eyes. It means I get to choose too. And I'm not letting you carry this alone anymore. Not for one more day. Behind her, faint and distant through the open shuttlecom, she could hear Naomi's voice crackling with static, and Marcus, weak but alert, and even Admiral Rowe, all of them urging her to reconsider, to come back, to find another way. There wasn't another way. She had read every page of her father's journal. She had seen what happened to ships and crews the moment the field failed even briefly. She understood with total clarity that this had never really been a rescue mission. It had always been an inheritance. Together then, her father said finally, voice thick with a grief that had transformed impossibly into something like relief. If you're certain, I've never been more certain of anything. He reached out, and where his transformed hand met hers, the ancient lattice around them flared to sudden brilliant light, not painful, but vast, as though something enormous and patient had been waiting 10,000 years for exactly this moment, two willing minds joining where the Violithi's ancient law had always demanded only one. The structure shuddered, reorganized and settled into a new, stronger rhythm. No longer a single strained thread holding back an ocean, but two, woven together, sharing a weight neither could have carried alone. Far across the line, Marcus felt the resonance field stabilize completely for the first time since they'd begun. Gasping in relief as the strain finally eased from his failing body, the dark, consuming shapes that had spread through the breach shuddered, faltered, and were slowly, inexorably drawn back into the sealed heart of the containment field, the door closing at last, more securely than it had in 10,000 years. Admiral Rowe, watching from the bridge of what remained of his shattered fleet, stared at the readings in stunned silence. The line, fully restored, stronger now than any record in conquered history had ever measured it. Weeks later, before the assembled Concord Council, Rowe would stand and say something no member of his species had said about humanity in 50 years of uneasy alliance. "They did what none of us could," he told the chamber, voice carrying across 1,000 worlds worth of representatives. Not because they were unafraid, they were terrified as anyone should be, but because they chose to act anyway. That is not recklessness. That is the rarest kind of courage this galaxy has ever measured. The Council would go on to formally name humanity wardens of the Omega Line, not conquerors, not explorers, but guardians, trusted with a burden no other species had ever been willing to bear. Aboard the Meridian, sailing home at last, Naomi sat with the small transmitter Elena had left behind, carrying one final message meant for Earth, for the crew, for anyone who needed to hear it. Elena's voice, warm despite everything, despite the vast and permanent distance now between her and everyone she loved, filled the quiet bridge. "I'm not gone. I'm just standing somewhere the galaxy needed someone to stand. My father taught me that some doors are worth guarding, even at a cost. I used to think that cost was a tragedy. Now I understand it was a gift. The chance to matter, to protect something bigger than myself, alongside the person who taught me what courage really means. Tell them the line still holds. Tell them it will keep holding. For as long as there are people willing to stand at the edge of the unknown and choose again and again not to look away. And tell them, for the first time in 10,000 years, it isn't just fear keeping that door shut anymore. It's hope.